Hello, my name is Dusty Bertolot. I'm the co-owner of Growing Goats, an outdoor family and outcome-focused brand that celebrates the journey of becoming and raising your greatest of all time, your goats. And in this video, what I'm going to talk to you about is the shouldas, the couldas, the documentation and the mitigation of a flood loss. For the last 15 years, I've been a licensed insurance adjuster, and I've done over 1,000 claims all across the country in all but 6 states. In that time, I worked anything from windstorms and hailstorms to disasters like tornadoes and hurricanes and fires and floods. And over that time, I've noticed that there's a repeating pattern that has either helped or hindered individuals and communities from recovering. The most important repeating pattern for success comes from asking a better question. What I've noticed is that in disaster situations, it's really easy for people to begin to ask the wrong questions. Questions like, why me? Or why didn't I? Or I should have done this, or I should have done that. Well, you can shoulda all day, but at the end of the day, all you're gonna have is shoulda all over yourself. The individuals in the communities that were the quickest to recover were always the ones that started asking better questions. Questions like, what can I do today to get back on my feet? Or how can we help? Research has actually shown that anytime that you have a negative thought, negative emotion, there's actually a chemical change in your mind that will last for 90 seconds. After that, it becomes a choice to stay in that emotion, to stay in that thought. Now, I know that's hard to believe, especially in the wake of all the flooding and stuff like that. But from my experience, what I've noticed and working disaster areas like Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Sandy and the Colorado fires is that the quicker that you can change, that people can change their mindset, is the quicker that they can recover. So let's just take the next 90 seconds, get rid of some of the shouldas and get rid of some of the misinformation that's out there so that people can start to get back on their feet. First off, any policy information that I talk about in this is generally speaking, I do encourage you to reach out to your agent and to talk about the policy coverage. I'm just speaking on a generally speaking across most homeowners policies and flood policies. The biggest question that I've been receiving is, does my homeowners policy cover flood? And the answer to that, quick and short, is no. Homeowners policies will typically exclude surface water underneath the coverage for their home, so you will not have coverage for flood. Now, the reason why is because flood is not a profitable peril. It's why it's a government policy that is written through FEMA, through the National Flood Insurance Program. And now your homeowner's policy does or may have an endorsement that you could purchase that would be for sewer backup and drain. So check with your agent, maybe if that's your case, that maybe you have that endorsement that you would have coverage for backup of sewer and drain. But let's maybe define actually what a flood is so people have a little bit better understanding of that. The National Flood Insurance Program, the NFIP, defines flood as a general or temporary condition of a partial or complete inundation of 2 or more acres of land that is normally dry, and 2 or more properties, one of which is your property, from either the overflow of inland or tidal waters, the unusual or rapid accumulation of runoff or surface water from any source, or mud flow. Okay, so now I know some of your thoughts are now saying, great, Dusty, well, we had a flood, I should have had a flood policy. Well, hold on to that thought, and before you go down the shoulda. Because before you ask shoulda, again, you should be asking could ya? Because there's a lot of, in order for you to actually be able to get a flood policy, your community has to participate in the flood program. Now, you can find out whether or not your community is participating at www.fema.gov/cis/wy.html. I'll go ahead and post this on our webpage underneath the blog section for this information at growinggoats.com, and along with other information again at growinggoats.com, where you guys can easily access this for finding out this information. But as you look and search, most of Sheridan County and Sheridan do participate in the flood program. So now I know your mind's going back to, well, I should have had a flood policy. Well, should have you had a flood policy? Every individual is going to be different based on what your building structure is, what what high risk area you're actually in, what floodplain are you actually in, you know, how your home is structured. Is it elevated? Is it post-firm, pre-firm? Is it on a basement? Is it on a crawl space? You know, and more important question to even start asking is, you know, how much does flood insurance actually cost? You know, what does it even actually cover? And if you go to the NFIP, they're going to tell you that anyone in the community should be carrying flood coverage. They say that 20% of all claims come from low risk areas and receive a third of disaster funds. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should have a flood policy. The average flood policy, and you know, when we're talking about how much an average flood policy costs, if according to valuepenguin.com, the average flood policy in the state of Wyoming costs $888, which is 27% higher than the national average. And now that again depends on whether or not you have a basement, or if it's a crawl space, if it's elevated or whatnot, can vary either way on that. One of the other big misconceptions is people's understanding of what a 100-year floodplain is. It doesn't mean that your property is going to flood once in the next 100 years. It means that in the course of any year, you have a 1 in 100 chance of having a flood. Or if it's a 500, it'd be 1 in a 500. So that would be a 1% or a 0.2% chance, respectively. So what does the flood actually cover? Well, again, I refer you to talking to your agent about flood coverage, or you can go to FEMA.gov and download the actual dwelling form. The government makes it pretty easy for you to actually see the policy, to see what you get. It's a pretty simple policy to know what's actually covered. The short answer to that is that you can get up to, or you can have up to $250,000 worth of coverage on your property if it qualifies. There are restrictions. For in the basements, for example, they allow coverage for a total of 17 items, mainly items that are going to service the property, like your water heater and things like that. Again, I'll put that on growinggoats.com, where you guys can go to the link to see those 17 items. But there is a lot of limited coverage in basements, limited coverage on personal property, and other structures that are there. So you'll have to do the math to see, you know, moving forward, if it makes sense to you guys to have flood coverage on your home. But be sure to really look into it, because it might have been a better deal for you not to actually have flood insurance, and it may be a better deal for you to have flood insurance. It just depends on your scenario. So now that the shouldas are out of the way, let's talk about, you know, well, how can I get back on my feet? And so if you are fortunate to have a flood policy and you have flood coverage on your home, the first thing you need to do is call and set up your claim. You know, get on the phone with your agents, get that claim going. You should expect to hear back from your adjuster, you know, 24 hours from getting that claim set up, where he's going to set up a time to come out and inspect your property. It's important that you document everything really well with photographs. The first thing the adjuster is going to need to do is determine that there was a condition of flooding, meaning that he's going to have to determine that multiple acres of land or 2 properties were inundated by water. So any videos or photos that you have from that is going to help him with that determination. So next after that, he's going to have to determine the water levels of the outside of your home and the inside of your home. And so I know it's tempting to go wipe off that water line on the outside of your house, but don't do that before the adjuster can look at it, or document it with a good photo showing the tape measure on the ground up above the water line. Now, it is your responsibility as a homeowner or as an insured to mitigate damages, and so that does mean that you may need to, you know, pull out wet drywall in your home. But before you do that, you need to make sure that everything's documented properly. Make sure that you have good overview photos of your rooms in your home. Make sure that you have tape measures in your house with a good photo showing it on the floor and up above the water line in your home before you ever rip out any drywall or anything like that in the house, so that you can have that documentation for your adjuster. If it's in the main level of a building, and you have contents, issues, or items in there that were damaged, be sure to document what room they actually came from. And if there's serial numbers and model numbers on it, make sure that you write that information down so that you have that information to provide to your adjuster. Get the wet stuff out of the house. After you get the wet stuff out of the house, then be sure to get some fans set up, some air movers going and blowing to try to get that thing dried out. In my experience, the worst losses that I've ran across was people that didn't hop on that and get it taken care of right away. And if you're elderly, or if you need help, ask for help. There's plenty of people out here that want to help, want to get out and help people get back on their feet. Reach out to church groups or your neighbors and just ask for help to help get you back going. I guess the main thing is the most important thing to remember is to think about your outcome. How can we get back on our feet, and how can we move forward? Be proactive. This is Dusty Bird-a-Lot with Growing Goats. I'll post this stuff up on our blog along with links and stuff for you guys so that you can have this information. Feel free to contact me if you have additional questions or more in-depth questions. Thank you, and hope you guys have a wonderful day.